Hello, math students. Welcome back to Module 2. It's called Arithmetic Operations, including Division of Fractions, or Arithmetic Operations, including Division of Fractions. That's kind of a funny title because sometimes it's called arithmetic and sometimes it's called arithmetic, so it's kind of hard for me to remember. So, Arithmetic Operations, including Division of Fractions. This is lesson 3, and it is called Interpreting Division of a Fraction by a Fraction. And so this is our third lesson, remember. Our first lesson was interpreting division of a whole number by a fraction. Our second lesson was interpreting division of a fraction by a whole number. And now our third lesson is interpreting division of a fraction by a fraction. So our goal today, we are going to learn how to divide a fraction by a fraction. The question that I want you to think about in this lesson is, what must be present to divide a fraction by a fraction? And if you don't know the answer yet, you will know by the end of our lesson today. All right, things to know. We have been talking about fractions, what each part of a fraction means, what it represents, and why it's important. And so one of the things that you really need to pay attention in this lesson to is the fact that dividing fractions by fractions is all based on having a common denominator. So a common denominator is the bottom number of the fraction that is the same as the bottom number of another fraction. And so a common denominator means that this thing and this thing are exactly the same. And as you can tell on these two fractions right here, they are not exactly the same. And so today I'm going to teach you how to do that. And hopefully this is a review, but I don't know. So I'm going to teach you as if it's not a review. So the first thing that we like to do is we like to really think about, okay, what is a number that both 3 and 2 go into that is the smallest that they share? So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it, but there's this thing called an LCM, okay? And an LCM is super important when you're working with dividing fractions by fractions because you're trying to find the least common multiple. That's what this stands for, is least, okay, common multiple. And a multiple, what is a multiple? A multiple is the answer to two numbers being multiplied together. So the least common multiple, if we multiply these two denominators together, the least common multiple that they would have is 6, because that's the smallest number that they share. And so what you're thinking about to try to determine what a least common multiple is you take the number, so 3 is the denominator for one, 2 is the denominator for the other, and you just start listing their multiples. So you say, okay, 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 5 is 15, and I'm going to stop there. Okay, so now let's do 2. 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 4 is 8, 2 times 5 is 10, and I'm going to stop there because the coolest thing that we have to do is you're finding the least. So that means the one that's the smallest. So usually it's the first one that they share. So you look at it. Here is the first one that they have in common. Because 2 does not have 3, 3 does not have 2, 3 does not have 4, but 3 does have 6. So that's the least common multiple. And so what we do after we find the least common multiple is we make it the LCD, which stands for least common, that's right, denominator. Okay? And so you're looking for the LCD, which is the least common denominator, and then you can solve. So the least common denominator that we found is 6. Okay, well that's not bad. So if I'm going to take 2/3 and find the common denominator of 6, and I'm going to take 5/2 and find the common denominator of 6, then I have to show my work. So we're going to put an equal sign, because basically you're making an equivalent fraction, okay? And so you have to ask yourself, how did I get, right, how did I get from 3 to 6? And what your answer is, times by 2. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. And so that answer is 3 times 2 is 6, 2 times 2 is 4. So now we know that 2/3 is exactly the same as 4/6. We just proved it because we used our multiplicative property. And so now we're going to do the same thing over here. So we have to ask ourselves, okay, how did I get from 6 to 2? Or 2 to 6. Sorry, let me say that a different way so I don't confuse you. How do I get from 2 to 6? Okay, not hard. I'm going to multiply by 3 because 2 times 3 equals 6. And that is true. But what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So 5 times 3 is 15. Okay? And so now I know that 15/6 is exactly the same as 5/2. And now, if I was asked to divide these, I totally could because they have a common denominator. And because they have a common denominator, I can divide straight across. If they do not have a common denominator, then I can't because they don't have anything in common. And so your job when you're dividing a fraction by a fraction is to find what they have in common so that you can represent them that way, and then you simply divide. Okay? And so let me show you how we would do this one. So these numbers are exactly the same, 2/3 and 5/2. And we came up with the least common denominator being that it was 6. So I'm just going to quickly do it again. And so the way that we got there is this is 4/6 and this is 15/6. Okay? And so it says the dividend is the number that is being divided. Okay? Let me say that again. The dividend is the number being divided. This is the number that you usually think about as the number that goes in the house, okay? And in this specific scenario, it's usually the numerator, okay? So the dividend with fractions is usually the numerator. The divisor is the number of times the dividend is broken apart. That means that that number is the number that sits at the door. Okay, and it's usually the denominator in this case. The quotient is the answer to the division problem. So now here is what we actually get to do with our division problem. And I have an answer here, but if you're looking at it, it doesn't make any sense because it says 2/3 divided by 5/2 gives us an answer of 4/15. Well, if I'm staring at that and I look at it, I have no idea where 4/15 came from because I don't see 4/15 anywhere. And 5 divided by 2 is not 4. Or excuse me, let me say that again. 2 divided by 5 is not 4. And 3 divided by 2 is not 15. So this makes no sense to me whatsoever. Well, it actually does. And it's going to make sense to you too in about a couple of minutes. Here is what you actually have to do. So remember how I gave you this big, long lesson about finding the least common multiple so you then can use that as the least common denominator. Well, let's do that. And now you're going to see the magic happen. And it's actually so incredibly awesome. So we learned that 2/3 is exactly the same as 4/6. So here's 4/6. Divided by, we learned from up here that 5/2 is exactly the same as 15/6. Then you also heard me say that now that it has a common denominator, I can just divide straight across. I can divide straight across. Now, I want to show you visually what this means. So if you look at a number line, okay, because it's very, very easy to show this on a number line. And I'm going to divide my number line into 6. So let's say this is 0 right here. This is 1. This is 2. This is 3, 4, 5, and just barely it fits 6. Okay, so that's sixths, right? And so what I have to do is I have to draw what I have, and I'm actually going to have to make them a little bit smaller because I need to go all the way to 15/6. So let's put this as these are here, these are here, These are here. And I'm sorry for squishing it in, but I just realized that I needed to be able to show more. Okay, so in order to have a whole sixth, you have to have 6 sixths, right? So here's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So right here is 6 sixths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 12 sixths. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 sixths. So that's what I really have on my number line. Okay, now some of you are going, oh my gosh, Mrs. Nelson, you lost me. Here's what I need you to look at, and don't get lost because this is so amazing. You're just going to flip out of your skin when you see it. What does this say? Right here it says 4 sixths. So what I have is I have 4 sixths. So here is 1, 2, 3, 4, and I stop because I have 4 sixths. Yes or no? Do you see them? Okay, this one says divided by 15 sixths. Oh, okay, so 4 sixths divided by 15 sixths. So I want you to look at this one because this is really, really cool. This says 15 sixths. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and of course I choose the one we can't see. Sorry, my markers are dying. I'm very sad. Okay, so here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, and they're 6. You saw me count them. You saw me draw them out. So what is 4 sixths, those purple ones, divided by 15 sixths? Well, I have 4 in the numerator. Check it out, guys. I have 4 in the numerator, and I have 15 in the denominator. Do you see it? Okay, let me do it again. I have 4 in the numerator, right? And I have 15 in the denominator right there. And why were we able to do that? Because they were sixths. Okay? If they had been 2/3 and 5/2, we wouldn't have been able to draw them. But because we turned them into a common denominator, now we can draw them and you can actually see it. Okay? So this is the visual representation of this answer. And now let's do it mathematically. Are you ready? This is so exciting. Here we go. Watch. I have a math sentence right here that says 4 sixths divided by 15 sixths. And because they have the common denominator, Mrs. Nelson said earlier, I can divide straight across in a sentence. So here we go. 4 divided by 15 is, you got it, 4/15. Everybody see that? 6 divided by 6 is 1. Holy moly, do that again. 4 divided by 15 is 4/15. 6 divided by 6 is 1. And now finish it up, kiddos. What is 4/15 divided by 1? 4/15. And we're finished. And the only reason we were able to do this is because we found a common denominator so that we could take it per 1. Okay, and that is so super huge. So whenever you have to divide a fraction by a fraction, all you have to do is find their LCM, which turns into their LCD, least common multiple, which turns into their least common denominator. You find their least common denominators, you write equivalent fractions, and then you divide straight across. Okay? Or you can draw it on a number line and you can actually see what you have because you have those common denominators. 4 sixths divided by 15 sixths gives me 4/15 as an answer. 4 sixths divided by 15 sixths gives me 4 divided by 15, which is 4/15. 6 divided by 6, which equals 1. 4/15 divided by 1 is 4/15. So either way, drawing it out or just dividing straight across, the only thing that you have to remember is that you must find a common denominator. Okay? So we didn't have to do any flippy floppies. We didn't have to remember which one is which. We just had to find a common denominator and we were done. That is so huge and so powerful. And I hope you guys have a complete picture of why dividing fractions by fractions is so easy, as long as you find that common denominator first. Okay? All right, so now let's take a look at our next page, because we do have one more page in our notes. And it is called the noun adjective model. And this model right here uses words and numbers to show the fraction parts of the division problem. And so what it says is we have 2/3 divided by 5 halves. 2/3 divided by 5 halves. And so what you have to do is you have to find the common denominator to do this. And so instead of it being 2/3 divided by 5 halves, we know that 2/3 is the same thing as 4/6, because we just found the common denominator is 6. And then you have divided by 15/6 because of our common denominators, right? And so then you just write what you say. So you do 4/6 divided by 15/6, and then simplify off the words. 6 divided by 6 is 1, right? And then 1 times 4 equals 4, and 1 times 15 equals 15. And so again, I'm left with an answer of 4/15. Okay? So that's pretty simple too, if you use the noun adjective model. Pretty simple. All right, again, the commonality is you have to find a common denominator. What do you have to find? Common denominator. Okay, area model, same thing we've been working on before. Area model is a model that uses the question, how many blanks fit into blanks? Okay, well in this instance specifically, it would be how many 5 halves fit into 2/3? Okay, how many 5 halves fit into 2/3? Again, you have to find that common denominator. So our whole amount that we're trying to have to begin with would be 2/3. So I go ahead and draw 2/3 because that's what I have. So here's my picture. I cut it into thirds, and I have this section and this section. This is what I have. So you're thinking about this is the pizza. Okay, this is what I have available for the pizza. And then I'm supposed to split it into 5 halves. Okay, 5 halves. So what I would say is we have to do this, right? 5 halves, because we're looking for halves. So basically we have to have 5 of them. Okay, well right there, that only shows me that we have 2 halves. So then maybe we need to go 5 halves here, right? And then we would have 5 halves here, right here. And then it says 2/3 cut into 5 halves. Then we would have 4/15 as our answer. So let's look and see how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That's where we needed to stop, right? So I'm going to actually take those off because we don't need those. And then what we have to do is we have to remember that this would be 4/6, and this is 15/6, right? And so then our answer would be how many 15/6 fit into 4/6. And so if we have that, then we would say, okay, they each get 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So our answer comes out to 4/15. Okay. I don't want you to worry about the area model as much, kiddos, but I do want you to just be aware of and remember the adjective model is just another one to remember, but truly the best one and the easiest one to work with is finding that common denominator and then going from there. So now let's go back to our goal for today. Today we are going to learn how to divide a fraction by a fraction, which is what we totally did. Question, what must be present to divide a fraction by a fraction? Everybody say it. What must be present? A common denominator. That's it. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much. See you soon.